Bullshit. Okay, sorry.
Okay, I suppose we should get started. So lecture 26. So I mentioned this one before, but we got 2 weeks left effectively. Finish strong. And the reason I say that is usually professors take into account how you finished the semester. If you put the effort in toward, they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Most students don't, which has always surprised me. I always finished strong. So we're going to hopefully finish up vitamins today. We'll move into feeding cows next week. Lab this week, please bring your laptops. We'll be using an Excel spreadsheet to balance rations. So the computer will be doing the math for you. Some people like this better than the paper rations or by hand rations. Some people find this extremely frustrating. So we'll try to walk you through it to show you how all this works. And hopefully you won't be one of those frustrated people we've had in the past. So last student success seminar chance is tomorrow at 1. For those of you that are interested related to the Dairy Club, we have 28 more thank yous to sign. We can do that at the end of class. Thursday lab, as I mentioned, we're doing spreadsheets. We'll also show you how the Penn State particle separation works. We'll be inside the whole time, so should be relatively warm. I asked you to think about, we've got a lab practical and an exam 3. There is enough time in the scheduled exam time, 2.5 hours, I believe they are, to do all that in one period. Do you want to? So we got 1 yes. Any other opinions?
What would be the other date we could possibly do the practical?
We would focus on whether the class wants to separate. And then if we want to separate, we'll find a time to set that up. So you can either take both that Thursday morning, or we can split the lab practical from the exam 3, and we could do it at a separate time. How many people would prefer to do them all at once? How many people would prefer to separate them? How many people just don't care? So it seems that the leaning toward getting them all done at once. There's certainly, you can take a break between the two. I'll be here all morning. I don't know if you have anything in the afternoon. So we'll plan on having them both that morning. I'll set up early. You can come in, get started when you want, work your way through it. You already know what the lab practical is going to be, right? I'm going to ask you to balance 2 lactating rations. I'm going to give you the same forms you've had. I'm going to give you a table 2. I'm going to give you some feed descriptions, and you have to calculate the requirements based on a cow description. You're going to do a dry matter, or at least show me that you know how to do a dry matter. What else? You have to be able to calculate new feed weights based on new dry matters. You need to partition a ton of feed into its component ingredients, component nutrients. You'll have to judge some feed quality. So most people get it done in under an hour. Take a break between that. The next exam should also be less than an hour. Any questions on that? I'll try to get everything posted so you know what's coming, which lectures are there. So a reschedule. I'm guessing we'll have to wait till Rosie gets in to figure out when you want to do that, or did you guys? Can if you want. Okay. So I'm gonna plan on you doing that. If you're not gonna do it, let me know. You two ready for tomorrow? This is next week, and then this is that Thursday when the exam is. You two want to wait that long, or you want to move it up?
Maybe we could do if we can move it to a Tuesday, because like I have 3 exams on Thursday. All my finals are just smashed right on Thursday morning.
Okay. Monday, Tuesday, which would you prefer?
We can do Tuesday.
Tuesday open for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Working together.
I'll double check with you after class, just confirm this.
Okay, so I'll make sure I get the buckets out. So what is that? That's the 12th. So I got to get the buckets out Monday night, make sure they're there.
So double check my.
So we're looking at December 4th for the other one. So that should get us through. What else we got? So last time we started our discussion of vitamins, and we talked about vitamin A. So it's certainly required by the animal. The NRC has taken the approach that since this is so hard to measure, we're just going to supplement on top enough so the animal gets taken care of. And we're going to base that supplementation on body weight and milk yield. So taking the average cow in your herd, how much grain they eat, and put in enough vitamin A in that allotment of grain that everything gets taken care of. So we have to be careful with vitamin A. We can get into a toxic level of intake. Has anybody heard if you eat too many shark livers, you can overdose on vitamin A? So if you're out in the ocean, stranded in the ocean, you start pulling in whatever fish you can get a hold of. And sometimes they'll get a hold of a shark liver here and there. That shark liver is very high in vitamin A. And you can run into trouble with too much vitamin A from that liver where everything is stored. So we mentioned this last time. Epithelial tissue integrity. Precursor is plants. We're looking at the green parts, a molecule called beta carotene. So moving on to new stuff. If we look at vitamin A, we have 3 different forms of that here. You've got a carbon ring here with a tail going out. You got slight differences molecularly, but they all seem to be active on some level as vitamin A. This is beta carotene down here. What do you notice this versus this? What'd you say? So if I divide this in half, I got 2. So effectively, dividing that in half gives you 2 or close to 2 retinols. If we look at the comparison there of what's where, or at least close to it. So beta carotene is found in the plants. There's some modification by the plants to get it to vitamin A. So bioavailability, with vitamins, we're dealing with a complication, not only as we did with the minerals, how much is absorbed in the small intestine, but with the vitamins, how much is destroyed or made in the rumen. And with our ruminants, that makes things very difficult to figure out. What exactly do they need? So 0 to 50% destroyed in the rumen. There's little to no data about the absorption of vitamin A in the ruminants. We know it tends to move with the fat. It's a fat-soluble vitamin, so it tends to be absorbed and move through this digestive system with the fats, which tend to take a different route than everything else. Stability, we lose vitamin A in our feedstuffs over time. It's not very stable. We put that hay up nice and green. We let it sit for a while or let it expose to the sun. We're going to lose that vitamin A over time. Preserved feeds are much lower in vitamin A than our fresh green feeds, like our lawn out here. Well, maybe not at this moment in time, but. So vitamin A is going to be absorbed for what we know basically in the jejunum. Does anybody know what that is? That's the middle section of the small intestine. Duodenum, or if you're English, duodenum, jejunum, ileum, the 3 sections to the small intestine. Once that vitamin A comes in, it tends to be stored in the liver. With our fat-soluble vitamins, we seem to have a propensity to store those things. And we'll talk a little bit, hopefully here at the end, if not next time, about why that storage might be helpful. So you're going to lose a lot in the rumen depending on what source you look at. The requirements based on body weight, based on what they're doing at some level. So IU, international units. The NRC 2001 expanded a little bit the functions of the vitamin A. So eye and vision, epithelial, it possibly helps prevent retained placentas. There's some suggestion it might help prevent mastitis. It might have an influence on the length and severity of lameness. And there might be some issues with stillborns that are not aborted that vitamin A may or may not be involved with. But that epithelial tissue is where we want to focus. So the skin, the eye, the reproductive tract, mouth, all those things are going to be influenced by vitamin A. So vitamin A, we got the moon out. This is the cartoon I was given when I was in your seats. Moon's out. When I got vitamin A, I need the moon glasses on to make sure that I don't get messed up. So you've got that night blindness. So from one of your students here, for starters, lay off the vitamin A. Maybe not scientifically accurate, but you can certainly remember vitamin A is eyes. Eat Angus so you don't go blind. Got any vitamin A? The liver says, yep. Vitamin D. Vitamin D very much intertwined with calcium's absorption at the gut and then reabsorption from the bones back to the blood. So vitamin A has the net effect of increasing the calcium in the blood, move things around. So uptake from the gut, you will increase the bioavailability if you're under the influence of vitamin D. So both of those things, resorption from the bone, absorption from the small intestines, will increase blood calcium concentrations. Vitamin D is necessary for mineral metabolism, moving those minerals where they need to be, and for bone growth. We think of vitamin D and calcium, but it seems to also be related to phosphorus status. Those two things go in the bone together, calcium and phosphorus. So they're kind of can't be really separated. There's some suggestions that vitamin D might be related to the immune system support. There are things going around on the internet that suggest vitamin D is great for the wintertime blues. So you need that when we, here in central New York, we bundle up, we lose the UV light, except for maybe the tip of my nose. We don't get that UV light on our skin, we don't get enough vitamin D. So with vitamin D and all our fat solubles, we have to worry about the deficiency versus the toxicity. So if we get too little vitamin D, we have poor mineralization of the bone. When bone is made, you lay down the protein shape and then you reinforce that protein with calcium and phosphorus to make it rigid, make it heavy. Has anybody done that thing with the chicken bone? You soak it in vinegar for a while and it gets bendy. The acid, vinegar, acetic acid pulls the calcium out, and what you're left with is the protein, and the protein is bendy. So without that, you're getting the rickets in the young, osteomalacia, very similar to osteoporosis in the mature animal. If I OD or overdose with my vitamin D, I'm going to start to put calcium all over the place, especially where it doesn't belong. So I'm going to start to calcify, turn to bone, a number of soft tissues. So muscles, liver, kidney, heart, lungs, those things, certainly the heart and lungs are meant to move. We have too much calcium, they start to lose that ability to move. So rickets, when we have the animal doesn't have the rigidity of the bones, they tend to bow either out or in an effort to find some sort of structural strength. So if we can get sunlight on our skin, our bodies can make it. So rats and deficient in vitamin D, and without sunlight, the animal is not exposed to sunlight. So we're not getting the absorption of calcium that we should. And effectively, it's like not having calcium in the diet at all. We're going to lower that bioavailability of that calcium. How does it all work? So you got a series of steps where you go from something related to cholesterol to something that almost the hormone-like thing, and that is converted to vitamin D1 or vitamin D2 and vitamin D3. So these things happen by UV light hitting the skin and in the kidney. So we need we're going to get enough vitamin D. It would be nice if we get out in the sun, get that there. So you've got a lot of different names. Vitamin D2 is here. Vitamin D3 is there. Hydroxycholecalciferol, dihydroxycholecalciferol are the formal names of vitamin D. So it's made by an animal with exposure to sunlight. It's made in the feed if that feed is exposed to sunlight. So wherever UV light works, it can make that conversion from something that's a precursor to it to a form, and then we can take those forms, pass them on to the kidneys to make the final steps. So difference between D2 and D3 is one carbon atom surrounded by hydrogens. I think everything else is more or less the same. So sunlight hits the skin. We do our first conversion. We absorb those from various sources. We get down to the D3 that does most of the work in the body moving through. So if we have to supplement, what conditions or what things that you might, circumstances related to the cow might you have to supplement vitamin D? If they get sunlight, they're probably taken care of. There's a lot of controversy as to whether vitamin D, is it a hormone? Is it a vitamin? It certainly, with this cascade, acts like a hormone. With sunlight on the body, it can be produced, but there seems to be some benefits from dietary intake of the vitamin D as well. So if we have animals in confinement that don't get UV light on their skin, we need to supplement. Cow out on pasture in the summer, we don't have to worry about it so much. So the focus on vitamin D has been in the vivo production. The amount produced is a function of the UV light hitting the skin. Has anybody seen those pictures of from the 40s and 50s of little kids standing in front of, they got the dark sunglasses on, they got as much skin as they can get showing, standing in front of those UV lights in Siberia in the winter, so they get their vitamin D? How do we usually get it here, at least historically? We put it in the milk, right? We add additional vitamin D to the milk. You've got the calcium, vitamin D working together, getting everything promoted and absorbed. There's a lack of measurement in the feed. It's something that changes. D3 and D2 are assumed to be equal in cattle. We don't know much about the bioavailability, how it's absorbed. Nobody's really looked at what happens to it in the rumen. It's assumed that it isn't destroyed, but we're not totally sure. I would imagine if the microbes had enough time, they could certainly rip it apart if they wanted to. But the focus is on adequate intake. We assume there's none in the feed provided. We're going to supplement on top of that to make sure we get a minimum in that cow, and then everything in the feed is bonus. So how are we going to do that? We're going to base that on body weight. So lactating versus not lactating. The 2021 NRC says 30 IUs for non-lactating animals per kilogram of body weight, 40 for lactating. And those nice round numbers certainly point toward, well, I think 30 is a good number. We're kind of guessing. So they haven't figured out. We know that excess vitamin D causes problems, but we don't know exactly what that number is in our dairy cows, whereas with our vitamin A, we have a feel for that. So some drawings from the past. Vitamin D is known as the sunshine vitamin. So putting that in there. Another one of those. Holstein. So out on pasture, getting all the vitamin D that she needs. Sunny D. Vitamin D. You can get vitamin D from the feed and from the sunlight. This is the one I was given. When you got the sunlight, bones are straight and strong. When we get a lack of sunlight, we get rickets, bendiness to the bones. So vitamin D, the shape of a D, forming rickets. Legs don't work. Damn legs don't work like they used to. I'm going to grow big and strong. Vitamin D. Same sort of theme there. Haven't had enough vitamin D. I've got holes in my bones. You got enough vitamin D, you're growing strong and healthy like me. Vitamin E. Vitamin E is broadly considered an antioxidant. Broad antioxidants in the body. We've got one fat soluble, vitamin E, one water soluble, vitamin C, and one mineral, selenium. So that antioxidant is going to support the immune system and figures to have positive effects of lowering mastitis in cows, lowering retained fetal membranes or retained placentas in cows, and minimizing metritis after calving. Bioavailability, they don't have a lot of information on this. They're assuming none is destroyed in the rumen. They don't have any data in ruminants about intestinal absorption. We can make assumptions that it's similar to other species, but we don't know for sure. We assume it moves with the fat, but nobody's tested that out on rumens. Stability, we're going to have losses in the feed over time. And it'll depend on the form and processing and how rapidly that's lost. So we lose our fat soluble vitamins over time, unless you're laying that vitamin D out, laying that stuff out. Vitamin E is a group of tocopherols or tenoids. So there's a whole bunch of things that fall under the umbrella of vitamin E. So it looks like this. These are all vitamin E's of one sort or another. Generally, this one up here, the tocopherol, is considered the most active form. But all of these different ones, the red marks here on my thing show where the differences are. They all have vitamin E activity. They all act as antioxidants. So this is one of the reasons we don't measure. You'd have to have a different gas chromatograph column for most of these vitamin E's, and then you'd have to add them all up together. So function, antioxidant. So anywhere we can prevent disease, it's going to come into play. Source is animal origin. There's lots in live plants. but they decrease rapidly in dead plants. So again, absorbed with the fat, it's a fat-soluble vitamin stored in the liver and in the adipose of the body for when it might be needed. So A, D, and E, absorbed with the fat, stored in the liver for some future use. Usually not a concern. We probably don't run into things unless we really go out of our way to reduce the vitamin E. The newborn and the young ruminants have very little reserves. We hope some of that comes in with the milk transferred from mom. You're going to run into white muscle disease in calves if you don't get enough vitamin E. It's also called nutritional muscular dystrophy. So these animals, they're basically, you've got oxidation damage in their muscles with a lack of vitamin E, tissue degeneration, and these animals are unable to stand. The white muscle disease in lambs, also called stiff lamb disease. Or you've got it in a calf. They just can't stand up. The muscles aren't working the way they should, is a classic vitamin E deficiency. So requirement, the NRC 2021, the requirement cannot be established. We're going to go with adequate intake, again, assuming the feed doesn't provide anything. And we're going to add supplemental to that we're going to get them into that at enough areas. So we're going to base it on body weight and stage of pregnancy. Where do we want to have our supplementation? So close-up animals, last 3 weeks of gestation. We want to double what we're putting into those. Usually we do that with a shot. Get that in Muci shot to get that taken care of. That animal have enough vitamin E, unless you got a separate close-up grain that you can get that done. So toxic effects, again, fat solubles can build up in the body and we can run into trouble, but they really don't know what those are. So vitamin E or selenium, lack of that, you can get muscular dystrophy, nutritional muscular dystrophy. That's the one I had when I was in your shoes. So I'm starting to get white muscle. Quick, take some vitamin E. Retain fetal membranes from a lack of vitamin E. I thought this one was interesting. Probably should take some kale so I don't end up looking like this. So what's happening here? E. So preventing mastitis as an antioxidant. So the last fat soluble vitamin we have is vitamin K. This one behaves a little bit differently than the others in the sense that it really isn't stored so much in the body. We need it for proper clotting of our wounds, also for the synthesis of certain proteins. We got a good source in green plants. It is also synthesized by the rumen microorganisms. And there should be more than an adequate amount from both of those sources, especially if we're out on pasture. So again, fat soluble, absorbed with the fat. Contrast to the other three fat solubles, A, D, and E. Very little is stored in the body. But as a rule, healthy cattle don't lack vitamin K. So what are we defining here as a healthy animal? Good rumen function. So they're on feed, they're digesting, they've got a good healthy rumen population. If they've got their rumen working the way it's supposed to, they should not have a problem with vitamin K. So who do we have to worry about? Potentially. Maybe just weaned calves. Rumens aren't working as good as they might yet. Maybe right around calving when cows tend to go off feed. Sick animals that stop eating. All those might be a concern for vitamin K. Again, little stored in the body. With the storage of A, D, and E, we can bridge some gaps. So if we stop eating for a little bit, we still have some reserves we can call on. Not the same there. So K is for clotting. So good German spelling of clotting. We use K's instead of C's. Think kindergarten. So one of the things about vitamin K, does anybody know that this was related to rat poison? The original rat poisons were made of warfarin. You also may have a relative on that to prevent blood clots. Warfarin is anti-vitamin K. It's an antagonistic to vitamin K. So if we can get rid of the vitamin K in a rat, they stop clotting, and every time they squeeze through a small opening or bump into a wall or whatever, they start to bleed. And you get so much warfarin in there that any little movement leads to a rupture of a blood vessel. That's why when you're feeding your rats warfarin, you'll usually find the dead ones next to a water source. Because if you start bleeding to death, you get thirsty very quickly. So low blood volume, your brain says, I need to drink, and I need to drink now. So how do I stop the bleeding? Got a little Band-Aid here with a K on it that's going to help take care of things. So try some vitamin K, you're ruining the good grass. Eat some green plants because I can't stop bleeding. So you've got 3 Band-Aids in the shape of a K or 2 Band-Aids in the shape of a K. So any questions about fat-soluble vitamins? Too fast, too slow? So we'll move over to water-soluble vitamins. We talked about that set funnel last time, where we've got the fat solubles going over the top, and then we'll have the water solubles coming down through the bottom with the water, the heavier water there. So we can start with vitamin C. Vitamin C is our water-soluble antioxidant. So 1 mineral, 2 vitamins for antioxidants. If you put it in the rumen, most of it will be destroyed. There's not much research, not much strong conclusions for the effects of vitamin C with cattle. And then probably the reason for that is they can synthesize their own. So after 3 weeks, they can take care of their own vitamin C requirements. You or I, we need vitamin C, or a number of bad things start to happen that are not positive. So the statement on vitamin C in the 2021 NRC, it's made by the cow Current data does not support a routine supplementation of vitamin C to calves or adult cattle. So gets us out of that pretty quick. However, in our simple stomached animals that are unable to produce it, we start to lose capillary integrity. We start to lose our gums. They start bleeding excessively. We get all kinds of gum disease, and that leads to what? Teeth falling out. So one of the problems that they found in the British Navy is that if you're living on hardtack and waters, everybody know what that is? Basically a biscuit and water. There's not, they didn't know it at the time, there's not a lot of vitamin C there. But the sailors out on the ocean where they don't have access to green plants and other sources of vitamin C start losing their teeth. But they found that the ones that were closer to the equator didn't seem to have that problem. The ships in the northern latitudes, the southern latitudes didn't have that problem, but as they got closer to the equator, they didn't. So what's the difference between those and those? We're living on fish, hardtack, and water. They had the opportunity, those sailors, to get citrus fruit. So they were able to get off the ships, grab a lime, grab a lemon, grab an orange, all high in vitamin C. So when the British Navy figured that out, they started to issue rations for the sailors leaving. You got a bag of limes when you left as part of your rations for your seafaring journey. And that's why British sailors are called limeys. So bad things about the skin, eyes, loss of teeth associated with the lack of vitamin C. The condition is called scurvy in humans. I know we use that phrase for other things, but that's the formal definition of a lack of vitamin C in your diet. So if your gums are bleeding, make sure you're getting enough vitamin C along with all the other things your dentist tells you to do. So scurvy, this is the one I had. Vitamin C, we're losing all our teeth. So pirate with his bag of limes. Antivirus, now with vitamin C. Choline, it's water soluble. The question is it a vitamin? And one of our definitions, or part of the definitions for vitamin, is we need very, very little each day. We're talking about choline in dairy cows. We're looking at grams per day needed. So that's more than we normally suggest or need associated with a vitamin. We know there's lots in feed. There's lots degraded in the rumen. There's even some made by the cow. It's very abundant in milk. The requirement for cattle has not been established, though a lot of people will consider supplementing it to help their transition cows. So if you could put together a separate transition feed, it might be cost effective to put choline, protected choline in that feed. If the feed goes to all the animals that are lactating, it's not cost effective. So it spares methionine, or so it seems to. It's involved in fat metabolism, and it's fed with the hope that it helps prevent ketosis. So deranged fat metabolism. Choline helps prevent that. Needs to be protected in the rumen or it gets destroyed. So you're going to have some encapsulation that will survive the rumen intact. But once it gets to the abomasum, the acid will open it up and free it for absorption. Choline is associated with fatty liver. So lack thereof. Lack of choline seems to predispose the animal to a fatty liver. So this is the drawing I got for choline. Does everybody get that one? So what do I have a stack here? Coal. So what is that coal doing? Leaning. And then, oh, my fatty liver. So it's amazing what things stick with you from undergrad days. And that drawing there certainly has stuck with me over the years. We had another student come up in your seats, came up with a riff on the Dolly Parton song. So Jolene, we're going choline, choline, choline. Please steal my fatty liver. So thought that was very clever. So take whichever one you want. Should have taken some choline. I got a fat liver. We've got a superhero approach here. Ketosis will destroy the herd. So we'll stop there. I've got a quiz for you. And if anybody wants to sign, we have 28 thank you cards for the buyers that we did not have in the original stack. If you want to do that, they are up here. Don't have to do it today. There'll be other opportunities. When you're done, you're free to go.